Hello, my name is Jimmy Dominique. I'm a VoIP support engineer here at DID Logic, and I'm talking to you today from our New York City office. And today we are going to cover how to configure your 3CX PBX system with our DID Logic SIP services. So just to give a quick overview, on the 3CX system, we'll cover creating extension, configuring your SIP trunk settings on your 3CX, configuring the inbound and outbound routes, and finally we'll test to make sure everything works. And hopefully I will give you a nice basic overview on how everything's working. And we'll also make sure to include links to 3CX's excellent documentation that they also have that will give you some more guidance on the specifics of 3CX itself. But today we'll be able to cover the basic setup and interfacing the 3CX PBX with the DID Logic trunk. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We'll always want to start off by logging into the DID Logic portal just to make sure everything is in order there. The proper credentials have been set up. So we'll go ahead and log in now. Okay, now that we're logged into our test account here at DID Logic, you'll want to go over to the SIP tab labeled SIP and make sure that you have created a SIP count. You just do that simply by clicking on create a SIP account. You just give it a name that you would like, and you would set up your passwords and assign a caller ID that and you could pick a caller ID from the numbers that you have already purchased. In our case, I have already created a SIP account that we'll use for this purpose and assigned it a caller ID. This is the number that we'll be using for our test purposes right here. And if we go over to our purchase tab, we will also see that here's the number that we'll be using for the testing. And we can also see that the destination has already been set up as well. But usually it's just very simple. And we also will link to another video that discusses this in depth on how to purchase a DID and assign a destination. But in our case, now that we've configured, we've confirmed that the SIP account is set up as the destination to our test DID, and that we have the SIP account created, the caller ID assigned, and we also have the credentials for the SIP account. So we have the password. So we'll have what we need in order to go over to our 3CX. So let's go ahead and log into our 3CX system. So this is our the web portal for our 3CX system that we have over here. I'm going to go ahead and log in. All right. And currently the only configurations we've made on this 3CX right now is enough to basically have it installed in our VM environment and to make sure it's accessible on the internet. So it's not connected to anything right now. So we'll go ahead and, as we mentioned earlier, start walking through the steps we need to make sure we have an extension set up and make sure we're able to test everything and have a successful inbound and outbound call by the time you're going to test. But I'll go ahead and just start off by creating a new extension that we'll use for testing purposes. So we'll call this extension 1005. Put in a test username, John Doe. Put in a email address. And for the outbound caller ID, we'll use the caller ID that we purchased on the DID Logic portal for use for this test. Okay, and we'll go ahead, hit OK on that. All right, so we now have a extension for John Doe created. So we'll go ahead and move over to the next step. We'll go ahead and set up a new SIP trunk. So just go ahead and click on Add SIP trunk. We'll select the US country and then pick DID Logic. we'll also go ahead and put in our test number here as well. 29. Okay. At this stage, we're going to want to make sure that we pick a DID logic proxy that is nearby us. So if we actually return back to the DID logic portal and go to the tab labeled SIP, under here you'll see a listing of all of our DID logic proxies, regional gateways that you can use. We would recommend using one that is closest to you to reduce all possible latency. Since I'm located here in New York, I will go ahead and use the New York gateway that's right here. So we'll go ahead and jump back over to the 3CX and just edit that just to use the regional proxy right there. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to, just for setting up an initial test, we'll just reduce that back down to 2. When you first create your account here at DID Logic, your account is limited to just for your initial settings, so that they're just in case, just for, to a low number. Once you've tested and you actually want to move to production, go ahead and just let us know. Shoot support an email or reach out to your account manager, and we'll definitely be able to arrange that an increase on your accounts. But for right now, for our purposes, since we're just testing, we'll go ahead and limit the number of simultaneous calls down to 2. Then we'll go into the authentication section. So this is where you would put in your SIP credentials that were created on the DID logic under the SIP tab. So we'll go ahead and do that. So in our case, it is this account that we're using right here. So the SIP username is the same username that we'll use in 3CX. And the password is the password that was set up. And in terms of routing calls, we'll just want to make sure that is the correct test number that we set up earlier. And we'll go ahead and route it to the extension that we created earlier. And we'll also route the after hours calls as well. Good. And for the caller ID, we'll go ahead and set the default caller ID here. Under the options tab, you will want to confirm that your call options to allow inbound, outbound calls are checked off. These are checked off by default, but we just want to make sure that they're checked off. Also, you'll want to confirm that your codecs are the ones that you prefer to use. We do recommend the G711, but we are compatible with the 729 as well as the GSM. Under the outbound parameters, for those who would like to be able to control the display name in their outbound calls, if you want to be able to put in your business name, this is the field where you would be able to control that. You would want to first make sure you shoot support here at DID Logic to let them know that you would like that feature enabled. Once it's enabled, you'd be able to manipulate different parts of the SIP invite so that it'll be able to display the way that you would like. So usually once that's enabled and you have the correct settings over here, you'll be able to make that occur. So we'll go ahead and click OK to get that set up. And while that's registering, we'll go ahead and move on to the next step here. So next we'll do the inbound routes. Go ahead and create a new inbound rule. Call the rule inbound 1. The DID is the DID that we set up earlier. Just want to make sure that inbound calls go to the John Doe extension that we set up earlier. Okay, and there we have the inbound. And finally, we'll go to the outbound rules as well. For the rules, we'll call this outbound 1. In this section, you would figure out how you would like to, for what extensions these would apply to. We'll go ahead and apply them to the default extension group, which by default, all the new extensions are created on. So by default, we'll send them over to route 1, which will be the DID logic SIP trunk. After that, we won't prepend or anything. For your specific organization, you might want to have more stripping of digits, whether you call internationally, what have you. The key thing is, once the digits are processed by your PBX, when you send them over to DID logic, we will need them in E.164 format, which will allow us to, basically have the country code in front of the number. So if you're calling United States, you'll want to have 1 in front of the number that you're wanting to call, just so that every country has unique numbers that they're calling. So that's the best practice that we would recommend. And we'll go ahead and click OK. And let's return back to the SIP trunks. Now you see now it has a green indicator that indicates that it has been registered, and we see the nice recent time code of the registered going well. So next we will want to set up a test device that connects to the 3CX PBX, and then start making some test calls on that device. So when you go ahead and create an extension, it should go ahead and send a welcome email out to the email address that you put in. So we'll go ahead, log into our email, and we see that we do have a recent email from 3CX. And within this email, we will have a configuration file that we could go ahead and download. And we will go ahead and open the download, which will open our 3CX client here, which acts as the 3CX branded soft phone, which we could then use to make calls. So we can see here the 1005 extension is now available, and we could go ahead and use that to make calls. So if everything worked according to plan, we should now be able to make calls inbound and outbound. But to fully test this out, I've already set up another test account using the Zoiper that has a different phone number attached to it. And we will go ahead and first test the inbound capability of this soft phone to receive calls from outside. So we'll go ahead and dial the test number that we set up on the 3CX PBX. So 289 3001. So as you can see, the inbound, we are getting an active call. We'll go ahead and hang up.
Record your message and press pound.
By default,
or
the
press star to contact the operator.
voicemail has been set up on new accounts. So we can see clearly that it is connecting to the 3CX PBX, and that's working. And then what we'll do next is make an outbound call from the 3CX phone over to our test soft phone that we have right here. We'll go ahead and actually let's pull up the dial pad in. And 0 7 0 3 4. As you can see, I'm dialing an E.164 format just for our testing purpose. But as you can see, the inbound call from our 3CX PBX is working great, our soft phone over here. So we'll go ahead and hang up the call. And that basically covers the basic steps that what you would need to do to set up the 3CX PBX system here. And that will get you up and running. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the DID Logic support team. We're always here and happy to assist you. And thank you very much for spending the time to watch watch our training video, and hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.